Right, good morning, everybody. If I can just get the screen up, I've lost the button on the screen. Hang on a minute and get myself live. Right, there I am. I've lost the button for a moment on the screen there. Right, good morning and welcome to another edition of the lockdown show Elevenses, with topical news, controversial views and biking tips. It's Friday, isn't it? Time is flying. I'm losing track of what day of the week it is. It's looking out the window. It's yet another sunny day in London. We've been really lucky with the weather so far over the period we've been shut down. So what have I got for you today? Well, I'll start off with the latest news, and I'll give you a sneak preview of a very special guest who's coming up in a future show too. I'll be talking about the Euro 5 emission standard, something I broached just a few shows ago. Tell you what it is and what it means for you. We'll also be looking at a new Honda, where there's an engine, there's a new model. And last but not least, we'll be carrying on with the regular series on storing the bike. And this time we'll be looking at how to care for your tyres. So stay tuned to the end of the show if you can. And if you can't, don't forget you can catch up later here on Facebook or over on my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK at the end, or you'll end up looking at somebody showing you how to use a hunting knife or something similar. Right, okay, don't forget, if you have a question to ask or a comment or a suggestion for another show, pop them into the comment box here on Facebook, and I'll get back to you when I get off air. And I'll consider whatever your request might be as well. Okay, all right, here we go then with the first story. First of all, as I said, special guest coming. Now, I've arranged a couple of guests already, and I've got a couple more hopefully in the pipeline, who I'll be interviewing and bringing you the interview on this show. The first will be on Monday, 20th of April. So make sure you put a reminder in your diary or on your phone right now so you don't forget about it. What I'll be doing is showing you an interview I recorded last night. It'll be part of the CE clothing series that I've been running over the last few weeks, which is looking at the recently introduced AA and AAA clothing rating. Most of the show, in fact, will be given over to a chat with PPE guru Paul Varnsbury. Now, Paul has worked within the bike industry for many years. He set up Swift Leathers years ago, and he's also been involved in the development of the CE standard. The chat with Paul is deep-ranging, it's comprehensive, and it's a little bit of an eye-opener as well. So if you want to understand what you're buying in terms of protective clothing and why buyer aware is so important, then don't forget to tune in. That's Monday, 20th of April at the usual time of 11 a.m. But back for today. Something I've noticed since lockdown is that on one hand, the viewing figures for these live shows are slowly creeping up. I started with about 5 viewers. We've gone up, we've gone into double figures at least now, and many more catching up on catch up, which is nice to know. But the views of my written work has dropped right off, and that means comments and likes and shares generally have dropped right off. Hang on a minute. Sorry, the perils of sharing a house and converting half of it into a recording studio, the other half on the phone. Okay, the obvious conclusion is that if I'm not getting those views on my written posts, that people aren't coming to read the page. Now, there's probably a number of reasons for that. I suspect that part of it, and I shall whisper this, so if your boss is listening, turn the volume down now. I suspect that a lot of the looks at the page are actually taken during the working day. Hopefully while people are taking a bite to eat, a cup of tea or something similar. But that's actually why my regular written posts generally go up at 11:30 in the morning. It's to catch the UK market who are sort of taking a quick break. So obviously there are a lot less people actually at work at the moment, and I suspect those who are at work are working a damn sight harder than normal, so maybe they haven't got time to look in. And home workers as well won't be on their regular routine. They'll be like my brother, who's trying to work around 3 young children. So the chances are that they're missing their regular Facebook fix. Second reason, I suspect people are actually using Facebook rather differently. Now, of course, we're all pretty much saturated with coronavirus news at the moment, but an awful lot of people are, making comments of their own on Facebook. So I suspect that that's got something to do with it as well. People have either just had enough of it or they're busy writing their own stuff. And if they're writing their own stuff, what will be happening, of course, is that will appear on your own timeline, and it will tend to push my posts down and out of sight even quicker than they normally vanish. So if you want to see my content, and the rest of that myself, I think I've written some pretty good stuff over the last month or so. The answer is actually to bookmark the page. You're already on it, www.facebook.com/survival skills. Did I forget a .com in there? I probably did. Facebook.com/survival skills. If you pop that in as a bookmark, you can go to it exactly like any other web page and just log into it directly. And that way you avoid having to go through your timeline. And a third possible reason is that we've all just changed habits, haven't we? We're not using regular behavior at the moment for those of us who are locked down. I'm certainly not. I'm reading some books that I've kind of acquired over the years and have had on the must get round to it shelf. I probably shouldn't tell you this because you will laugh, but I've got back into a hobby that I had when I was much younger. I'm actually building a model railway, something I last did when I was 13 or 14. Anyway, whatever the reason, don't forget the tips on Tuesday and the skills on Saturday pieces are still going out. I've not dropped all my writing for the live shows, and I will be looking in the one of these tips at a piece of bad advice that I think has been put out on the internet far too often, and I've just seen it resurface as something to practice while we're locked down, and I'll explain what it is and why I don't think it's right. Okay, what else is going on? Well, one part of the motorcycle industry that doesn't seem to have suffered from lockdown is the auction industry. The auctions obviously do go out online already, but a specific motorcycle auction house went live with an auction just the other day, and they sold 129 lots. The total for the sales was a fairly staggering £900,000, and that represents, according to their figures, a two-thirds success sale rate. So they got rid of 2 in every 3 motorcycles. Top item was a 1955 Vincent Black Shadow Series C. Nothing much too surprising about that. That went for £47,000. Of course, if you are one of the proud owners of those machines, exactly when you'll be able to pick it up is anybody's guess. But hey ho. My news feed is still updating me with fatal and injury crashes, some of which have been described by the police as resulting from non-essential journeys. There have been at least 2 fatalities and 2 serious injuries since Wednesday's show at 11. And that doesn't mean bike crashes are continuing to run at close to pre-lockdown levels, which is fairly astonishing given the traffic levels out there. So if you know someone who's continuing to ride because it doesn't do any harm, maybe just a quiet word. Latest news is that we'll be locked down possibly as far as the end of May. So I'll be continuing to run these shows at least till then, and I'll probably be doing something along this line beyond, even when we are released from Barracks. So I'll be continuing to talk about storing the machine. But just quickly, do you remember I was talking about how careful we need to be whilst cleaning the chain? Well, this is why. To read out the little story, firefighters from Yeovil Fire Station were called out on Tuesday evening to free a man's finger that was severely trapped in a motorcycle chain. They used small tools and a Makita saw to release the stuck finger. Well, hopefully that means that they sawed through the chain and not the finger. But remember, never ever go near the back wheel of a motorcycle with fingers, cloths, or anything else like that when the engine is running. It's far too easy to snick it into gear and get something caught. So use it only when the bike is engine off. Right, okay. Just a quick reminder, you're watching Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills with the Elevenses show. We'll be moving on to the second story, which is all about Euro 5, and then we'll just have a quick chat about new Honda 1100 Rebel, and we'll finish the show with that tyre care item. So what's Euro 5 then? Well, you may remember in a previous show that one of the most immediate problems for the motorcycle industry is this new emissions specification. As I mentioned, as of the 1st of January this year, all new type approved motorcycles, mopeds sold across the European Union and the European Free Trade Area must meet this new Euro 5 environmental standard. It was replaced the surprise Euro 4 specification. Now, specifically, regulations allow for a limited number of existing stocks of the older Euro 4 standard to be sold on, during a period of a year. There is a problem here, though, that obviously plummeting sales are going to leave dealers and importers with stocks on sold machines. So, motorcycle industry in the UK and FEMA in Europe have been pushing for an extension to that. No word on that yet. Apparently, there is already an extension on this period where the two standards are permissible for niche bikes like enduros and trials motorcycles, and three-wheel mopeds as well. Light quadricycles are also included. So they have up until 1st of January to be sold on. But what is Euro 5, you might be asking anyway? Well, it's a standard that will bring the pollutant emissions of motorcycles and mopeds and those other odd classes I just mentioned into line with Euro 6 cars. And basically, a bit of history. Euro 1 came in all the way back in June 17th, 1999. Euro 2 followed on April 1st, 2004. Euro 3 was January 1st, 2006. And in 2013, the EU actually revamped the entire system and actually laid out the roadmap for implementing Euro 4 and Euro 5. So the manufacturers have had 6+ years to actually deal with Euro 5. Euro 4 actually came in on 1st of January 2017. And as I've just said, Euro 5 applied from 1st of January this year. Now, obviously, emission standards have ramped up across the board under Euro 5. And specifically, there are lower limits for pollutants, carbon monoxide, which is a nasty toxic gas, unburnt hydrocarbons, which are known to contribute to breathing difficulties and also lung cancers, and oxides of nitrogen, which are also very toxic. At least NO is. So what are Euro 5 motorcycles doing about this? Well, they're going to be equipped with a number of different technologies. They'll be bringing in three-way catalysts, for example. The oxygen control sensors, more complex electronic engine management systems are all coming in. Fuel injection is being uprated to meet the requirements. And one of the areas where there is significant development is variable valve timing and variable valve lift technology. Now, this isn't new. Those of you with a very long memory may remember that there was a Suzuki Bandit built, a little 400, which had variable valve timing years and years and years ago. Honda built a bike called the CBX 750, which used hydraulic valves rather than mechanical ones, and that would have lent itself to all sorts of interesting jiggery-pokery had they gone down that line. In a way, I wonder if that technology was being used as sort of proof of the pudding, as it were, 30-odd years before it was actually needed. But anyway, many of these technologies were already being implemented into bikes already. Now, as I mentioned, the variable valve timing, variable valve lift, several manufacturers have already gone down that route, and the most notable example is probably the shift cam technology on the BMW bikes. You probably saw this on the R1250 engine, where there were some wonderful graphics produced online. But it's also found on their S1000RR engine. Ducati have got a desmodromic valve timing system running on the Diavo and the Multistrada 1260. And the GSX-R 1000 also runs a variable valve timing system. So they're all in production already, and we're going to see more to come. Indian, for example, has patented something that would give its Thunderstroke engines VVT. So, okay, basically how it works is it allows different valve overlap for different engine speeds. In a high performance engine, where you're looking to get as much power as you can, basically you want the valves open for as long as possible to whack in as much fuel mix as possible and to chase as much as its spent gases out of the exhaust port as possible. So basically both inlet and the exhaust valves are open at the same time to get that flow through the engine. But at low speeds, what that means, low engine speeds, I should say, what it means is that in fact you end up chucking unburnt fuel straight out of the exhaust valve. So that has the effect of increasing the tailpipe emissions, but it has an effect that's of quite actually useful to us, or quite unuseful for us. It increases fuel consumption too. So by changing the way the valves actually open, you change the way the gas flows through the engine in a way that you can't do simply with revs. So basically, you can have your cake and eat it. You can have an engine that produces lots of power at high revs, and you can have an engine which is fuel and emission efficient at low revs. Another strategy is that the engine displacements are getting bigger. Now, basically, that allows for reduced emissions. Now, I'm not actually quite sure how. I'll have to do a bit of research and find out why. But the Africa Twin's a notable example. That engine was built as 1,000cc, and it's already grown by another 800 and something to help reduce emissions ready for Euro 5. The Ducati Multistrada also gets a bump in capacity as well. So basically, they can produce same amount of power as a smaller engine, but it's at lower engine speeds, and that way we can control the emissions better. What else is in the Euro spec? Well, durability provisions. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, what it means is how long the vehicle actually meets the emission specs that it was sold with. And under Euro 4, you had to meet those specifications for 20,000 kilometers. That's about 12,500 miles, so not very far. After that, the engine could begin to wear, and the emissions would rise accordingly. For Euro 5, it's been extended to the estimated lifetime of the vehicle, and that requires new onboard diagnostic system over and above what's already there for Euro 4. So we've got more onboard diagnostics, and we've got more identification, more flagging up basically of malfunctions and deteriorations of the emission control systems. So what else has happened? Well, basically, this is the emission regulations. A lot of people see them as unnecessary or interfering, but they have done significant jobs. The combined emissions of hydrocarbons and nitrous oxides, for example, have gone down by over 96%, and carbon monoxide emissions have been reduced by 92% over those bikes that predated any of the Euro standards. So it is a terrific achievement, and it is part of the sort of green vision for motorcycling, which the motorcycle manufacturers themselves have adopted. So if we want motorcycles to continue to be part of a sort of multimodal transport system, we do need motorcycles to be clean. How does Euro 5 affect you if you've got an older bike? Well, the answer is, do you ride in an emission control zone? If you do, then you need to know how that control zone operates, if there's times on it, if there are charges, and what vehicles are charged and which aren't. Some Euro standards may get through with no charge or reduced charge. Others, the lower, older standards, may well be charged or possibly even excluded altogether. You need to know what's what. Long term, well, it's almost certain that emission standards will continue to ramp up. Petrol engines are already going by the board. For cars, we're going to have, everything will have to be a hybrid or even just full electric. Be interesting to see how motorcycle designers cope with that. And there's a knock-on effect that, which I suspect people haven't yet thought about. One of the side effects of the lockdown is the quality of the air has improved enormously in big cities, and I think everybody's appreciating that. The air is cleaner, the skies are clearer, and I think it's going to be hard to go back to the dirty standards that were accepted before that. I suspect that people will demand cleaner air. Okay, so where are we now? We're just about to move on to our fourth story. No, we're not. The third story, where you're watching Kevin Williams here. Don't forget that if you can't ride, you can still read, and my paperback books are still available via my publisher. So do get over there, have a look, see what I've written, and help me out by ordering a book. It's at the moment, it's virtually my only income. So Any book sold is a big bonus to me. Right, okay, third story, just a quickie. I mentioned the bigger engine in the Africa Twin. Well, if you've got an engine, you might as well use it. Honda have a 250 and a 500cc Rebel, which is their kind of custom cruiser thing. The twin cylinder engine out of the Africa Twin, that 1100, is expected to power a new large cc Rebel. The engine itself in the Africa Twin is a bit of a standout with its dual clutch technology, and it's expected that that may well see its way into the cruiser too. If Honda follows the usual pattern, the 100 horsepower Africa Twin will probably end up being retuned, I should say, rather than detuned, for lower down torque and mid-range. But it's also likely to get all the usual electronic aids that we're seeing on new machines, such as traction control, maybe even cornering ABS. Whether a quick shifter is necessary, as one report suggests, I don't know. But slipper clutch possibly. Those technologies are out there. It doesn't cost much now to bolt them onto new machines. So look for a new 1100 Rebel soon to come. Okay, so moving on rapidly. Don't forget, you can catch up with any of my missed shows over on my YouTube channel. And if you're here for the live show, they're Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays at 11 BST. So do come along, make a date in your diary. Right, okay, on to the fourth and final part of today's show. I've been talking about how to get the bike in a fit state to be stored for a long term. Initially, we were locked down for a sort of provisional 3 weeks. We've just been told it's at least another 3 weeks and probably till the end of May. So it makes sense to get the bike sorted. Now, first thing I would say is that if you were with me last week, you'll recall I started by cleaning up the rear end of the bike and getting the greasy areas shifted. I mean, it's really important to start with that, because if the back end of the bike is filthy and you're trying to do anything else, you will just simply smear the muck over the rest of the bike. So get that rear wheel clean. But one word of caution, something I should have mentioned last week and forgot. Recently, I had tyre valve fail. I was actually out on the road. I literally just finished the training course. I pulled into a petrol station to do a debrief for the trainee. And as I parked the bike, I thought, it's funny, the front tyre feels a little bit flat. We had a quick chat. By the time I got back on the bike, the front tyre was definitely feeling very low. And having a quick spin round, I couldn't see anything in the tyre. So I walked over to the tyre machine, put a 50p in it, blew it up. Or rather, I attempted to inflate it, and the valve actually came off in my hand. So that was the end of my riding for that particular day. Basically, there was a big crack in the valve and it just came off. So I had to abandon the bike and then go back with tools the next day, get the wheel off and get the tyre off and get a new valve core in it. Now, when I checked the other bikes and the rear on that particular machine, I found that all of them were actually quite badly perished. And the only conclusion I can come up with, given that there was two different machines involved, is that I'd used a particularly aggressive wheel cleaner to get the wheels nice and shiny at the end of the winter, and that I hadn't actually cleaned the chemicals off properly. So this is a word of warning. If you're cleaning your wheels, remember that your tires and your valves are made of rubber. Anything aggressive in that wheel cleaner could easily attack the rubber. So you must get plenty of water on that wheel and flush it well clear. So whatever it says on the tin about being kind to the wheels, I would be very cautious now about getting that well flushed off. Anyway, having got the rear wheel clean, you can move on to something else. Now, this was a question that came up a couple of weeks ago, and I promised to answer it. And that's whether or not we should be rotating the tyres to take the load off them. Well, the theory is that as the bike sits, the weight of the machine is on the tyres, obviously. And if the tyres stay in the same place, then the tyre is compressed in just one place, and that can damage the tyre carcass. Now, it may not be obvious when you get back on the bike from the outside that anything has happened, but there could be damage. and it's likely to cause vibration if you ride, a little bit like an unbalanced tyre. But leave it long enough and you eventually see that the rubber in the sidewall has actually started to crack. That has happened to me. I found that with a bike that didn't get ridden for about 5 or 6 years. When I hauled it out of the garage and got it going again, the first thing I need to do is go and get 2 new tyres for it. At that point, really, you need to scrap those tyres. So the idea is that by rotating the wheel, we can change the contact pressure patch and we'll reduce the chances of that kind of damage. Okay, so just basically spin the wheel round. It's easy enough. If you've got the bike on the center stand, you can turn them both by hand quite easily just by rocking the bike backwards and forwards. Okay, if you're on side stand, then it's slightly more tricky, but you can basically put a jack under the swinging arm and move the rear wheel, and you can shift the front wheel with a bit of effort too. Paddock stands, of course, help here as well. Another tip which followed on from this was about reducing the tyre pressures. Now, do we really need to do this? Good question. I've had a good read around to see what the wisdom is on this. Some websites simply say we should reduce the tyre pressure to about half of normal. Now, think about that for a moment. If the bike's actually standing on the tyres, then it's the air in the tyre that is supporting the tyre and stopping it developing a flat spot. If we take a lot of air out of the tyre, we're actually going to exacerbate that flat spot problem. The tyres are going to deform even more than normal under the weight of the bike. So if we drop it by half, that sounds rather a lot to me. Now, I'm not a tyre expert, so if you are, or if you know anybody who is, I'm open to correction. But think about this for a moment. If you've got a car, have you got a spare wheel on it? If you have, what pressure do you keep that wheel at? It wouldn't be half the normal pressure, would it? You'd keep it at the operating pressure. Now, I know a bike tyre is not a car tyre, but there is a lot of similar technology. They're usually all radials these days. Obviously, a car tyre could be called upon to be used at any moment, whereas we normally don't have spares lugging around on our motorcycle. But it did make me wonder whether this half pressure advice is actually so necessary. Maybe it's actually going a little bit too far. So I had a logical think about this. Now, one difference between a bike tyre and a car spare is obviously that the bike is sitting on those wheels all the time. Possibly both, maybe just the rear. Now, if you've got the bike on the center stand, the rear wheel is normally clear of the ground. Occasionally, it's the front wheel. If you've got something very odd, like an old Jawa, but that means there's no weight at all on one of the tyres. So what I suggest is dropping the tyre pressure a few psi, and that won't do any harm. But think about which wheel's actually supporting the bike. If you drop the pressure too much, you're going to lose that natural nice curved shape of the tyre, and you will actually end up exacerbating the flat spot. So maybe a few psi down, but I suspect that dropping it by half is too much. And if you don't have a centre stand, then the bike's resting on both tyres. So again, I would say that it's probably not a good idea to go to half tyre pressure. Okay, you're not sitting on the bike, but there's still the weight of the machine. So maybe dropping it a few psi front and rear is not so bad. I stress, as I say, I'm not an expert on this, but this does seem to me a logical conclusion. Something else that comes up fairly regularly is whether or not we should actually be putting something under the tyre. What's happened there? Hopefully I'm still going out. I just had something flash up on the screen there, which doesn't normally flash up on screen. Yeah, so should we be putting something on the tyre, on the ground between the tyre and the surface? Well, I'm not entirely sure why this should be seen as so important. After all, tyres are designed to run on the road, and I'd suggest that there's not a great deal of difference between a tyre running on the road and a tyre actually on your driveway or in your garage. If there is a difference, it's probably in the cleanliness of the surface. It's likely that the road is far more contaminated with oils and fuel spills and general chemicals than your own driveway. But obviously do flush your driveway well clean after you've washed your bike, and don't leave that muck under the tyres. It does make me wonder about whether or not we need to put something under the wheel. But if you want to, the usual advice seems to be a bit of old carpet. I have seen cardboard. If you're indoors, that'll be fine, obviously. But if you're outdoors, that won't last very long in the UK's climate. The idea is that it spreads the contact patch a little bit further, takes a little bit of the pressure off that contact zone on the tyre. But quite frankly, I would imagine that the cardboard will fairly quickly collapse and the fibers in the carpet will compress too. So I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to work, but I doubt it will do any harm if you want to try it. Right, well, astonishingly, our time is up again. It's just turned 11:30. What can I say? I shall round off. Don't forget, we'll be back with more news, views, and tips on Sunday. I told you I was forgetting the day of the week. In the meantime, don't forget to check out my regular posts on Facebook here. You can do that after you've watched the show if you like. Don't forget, Monday, very special event. I've got Paul Varnsbury coming along to give us an interview on the CE clothing, and I will have some other guests coming up in the future as well. So for now, thanks for watching. Stay tuned, ready for the next show in 2 days' time, and I hope I'll see you then. All right, and bye for now from Kevin Williams. Thanks for watching.